I spent all this time like learning all the technical stuff, but I ended up in a very like businessy
Yeah.
role because I constantly have to like understand the business to be able to like meet their needs. And so I think that's really interesting. And I think that's like a way that I'm always like learning because the better quality to have is like learning how to like learn fast and adapt. I feel like some people get discouraged. If you could adapt and if you can learn, you could just go with the flow. I feel like you'll do great.
Welcome to the Job Dictionary podcast. Today I'm going to be interviewing Arlette Lucas, who is actually going to be talking to us about what it is like to work in UX development specifically. Welcome. And first off, Arlette, I'm going to ask you three questions that we ask every single guest. So, in your own words, could you tell me what do you do? Where do you live? And what did you want to do when you grew up?
Thank you so much for having me. So what do I do? I'm a UI UX developer. So I build web applications for our internal and external clients and like the people that do sales, close contracts and things like that. So I make these applications to facilitate their job, which is really exciting. And then I am in Austin, Texas. This is where I grew up. So it's exciting to be back here after college and stuff. And then growing up, I always wanted to be a teacher, which is very different than what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I want.
Awesome. And where did you go to college? Just curious.
Yeah, I went to Texas State in San Marcos.
Awesome. Yeah, San Marcos is fun. I've been there. I visited a few weeks ago and the river is so fun over there.
We're so
Love it.
pretty for sure.
Yes, it really is. Okay, so how long have you actually been working in this field?
Yes, so I've been working in this field for 2 years now.
Awesome. Okay, and what made you want to get into this career path since you're mentioning you actually wanted to be a teacher growing up? So, how did you get your start?
So I think being a teacher, I feel like that's very rewarding. But as like a first gen student, it was more about like making sure that like job security, money security, that was gonna happen. So that's kind of what drove me to get into like coding and things like that. So I started pretty early on. I did a lot of coding in high school, and then that's what I majored in at Texas State University. So it
Awesome.
just kind of followed through. But then at my first job, I was a full stack software engineer,
Mhm.
and I was developing this application for their like biotech stuff. And I really enjoyed all like the web application development that I was doing and like all the colors and like how pretty things could look. And I realized that like I spent all this time learning to do like back end things when I really was very passionate about like the front end.
Front end.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. I so just random, but I'm currently getting like a tech certification and we're kind of developing an app.
Yeah.
So going through all that process and I got to do like the frame by frame of like,
Yeah.
the UI UX and I was like, "Oh, this is actually really fun." So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool. Okay, could you share with me, not everyone who codes did actually go to college, to get an engineering degree. So, do you think there's certain certifications, even just degrees that are really required to get into this type of role?
hmm I think that's hard because everyone I work with went to college for
Okay.
like coding or
Yeah.
UI, UX specifically. But I do think that there are certifications that could help you land a job, even if the degree isn't in coding or even if you had a different path. I would recommend like the Google like UI, UX certification. I think that one's a really good one. I looked into that one just because what I'm doing now, it's not like what I'm specialized in doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. And are there other job titles that this position goes by, or is it mainly just UI UX developer? Just
Mm,
curious.
I feel like there could be like so many different things. I don't know, like developing front end developer, uh,
Right.
front end software engineer,
Okay.
things like that.
Okay, awesome. And just curious because I've talked to, different professionals in like UX UI. Are there people who are in a more design role that are still doing a lot of coding, or is that totally separate?
Um, at my job and like my team, it's pretty separate.
Okay.
So I have like a UI UX designer and she builds all like the wireframes and she
Yeah.
gives like, the like idea and like where we are going with things. I get to add some like suggestions on like whether I like things in a specific way or like where the process should be, just to help her make sure like the wireframes are in the right path, but
Right. Okay.
separate.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And could you share a bit with me about what does the day-to-day look like in your job? Like what's start time and end time, or like what percentage of your job do you do solo versus collaborating with other people, remote, in office? All of those details are super appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. So when I started it was like mostly remote. Now it's switching over to hybrid. I feel like we're seeing that across the industry.
Yeah.
However, I'm only supposed to be like in the office 1 or 2 times a week, so it's
Okay.
very flexible even. And then the times I do come to the office, I go in like 10 a.m. So it's very
Nice.
like later. I skip the traffic. So that's really good for me. And then I'll be there for a couple hours and then I'll come home and do some more work. But usually I like to do work very early just because nobody's like, or a lot of the people on my team won't be on yet. So I'll hop on like 7 a.m., 7:30, get a bunch of stuff done or reply to people. So yeah, so I like to start early, but you're not required to start early.
Yeah.
It's like kind of personal
Pretty
preference.
flexible.
Yes, it's very flexible and like the hours are very flex, but that also means that some days I have meetings late at night, 9 p.m.
Right.
meetings. I
Oh,
am
wow.
coding like at 9 p.m., 10 p.m. So
Okay.
like work, it's not very like separated from my life, I feel like. I feel
Okay.
like it all just kind of combines and intertwines.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so definitely still working outside the 9 to 5. There
Yeah.
is that flexibility. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And so what about, the tasks that you do on the day to day?
Yeah, so there's like different stages of projects. So I get assigned like a project and it goes through the different stages. And so first like the requirements, all that gets done. So there's a lot of documentation I actually do. There's a lot of like feedback I provide for like the business needs on like the technical side, depending on like, is this possible? Is this the path that we want to take? Is this the experience the users need? And then we kind of go through some features that it's either the users need or it's a nice to have because some
Yeah.
features are more work than others. And depending on like how much time you want to spend on one specific thing, and sometimes it's just a nice to have. So if it's not critical, then we kind of like put that towards the back. So it's a
Right.
lot of like figuring out what's the most important task and then diving in and building the application or making changes to the application.
Yeah.
Then I also do a lot of like something like, let's say like something went wrong and like this isn't working or like this new feature isn't working, then it's my responsibility to like go through like the entire application and like debug it and like figure out and like pinpoint what's not working and provide a solution. So
Yeah.
it's like a lot of different things that I do during the day.
Okay, that's awesome. And I know you're mentioning applications a lot. What language do you use to code those?
Yeah, so we use so there's Salesforce. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Salesforce.
I
Yeah,
was
it's
like, I know Swift, I know Python,
yeah, so
JavaScript a little bit.
yeah, so
Yeah.
those are like languages, but this is like more of like a web application that companies
Okay.
use. And so it's Salesforce. So we build custom applications for our users to be able to use in Salesforce. Um,
Okay.
Salesforce can only do so many views or like so many
Right.
abstract things from like their like drag and drop type of vibe. So yeah, so I
Gotcha.
do custom solutions to like implement so they can use Salesforce in like this alternative way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I use JavaScript and then we also use this other platform called Squid and it's like integrating both of those.
Okay, yeah, and you're touching on my next question like right now, but so what tools, technologies do you use a lot on the day to day?
Yeah, so like I said, Salesforce is a big one. A lot of companies use it. So yeah, so Salesforce, and then just like DevOps, which is from Microsoft. That's like project planning and things like that. That's where I do a lot of documentation. And then just like all like the Microsoft tools. So we use Teams a lot and things
Yes.
like that. Yeah. So that's the yeah.
Awesome. And okay, could you share with me what's like your favorite thing about your job? What's the most interesting to you?
Um, I think it's like where business meets like technicalities because like I spent all this time like learning all the technical stuff, but I ended up in a very like businessy
Yeah.
role because I constantly have to like understand the business to be able to like meet their needs. And so I think that's really interesting. And I think that's like a way that I'm always like learning because all this like business things don't like just click at some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get that. I'm on the opposite end of you. I'm like a business major getting a technology certification. So I'm more like, woo, a lot of technical stuff to learn.
For sure.
So I totally hear you on there. What about the hardest part of your job? So like what's the most emotionally challenging, maybe like boring on you day to day?
Yeah, I think the most challenging is that like sometimes like it's not the same implementations you're doing. So sometimes it's like completely like new and you have to come up with like these like crazy solutions. So like recently in like one of my projects, I spent like I don't know, like 10 to 15 hours, like learning new framework and like learning new like
Right.
coding language just to kind of like get this thing to like work for the
Yeah.
deadline. So it just, I feel like you're always just needing to be able to like learn on the go and like adapt. So I think that's the most challenging.
Challenging, yeah. Especially with technology that's changing like all the time.
Yeah.
So feel that. What about, okay, you touched on this a little bit earlier. You said because of the flexibility and like the time and like hybrid environment,
Mhm.
sometimes it's hard to separate, office from home. What else would you add to that, if any?
Oh my God. I think it's important to have like boundaries. For like people getting into like a more flexible role. So I definitely do have like some boundaries where like I'm like, oh, I'm certainly like not available at this time, like hard stop, things like
Right.
that. Because even though like some days I am more flexible than others, like I make that like very known, like, hey, like this is a hard stop for me. Like I am not gonna like be here for this. So I think having boundaries for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. And let's see. Are there busier seasons in this role, or would you say that it's kind of consistent year round? Does it vary by project? What do you think?
I think I feel like that's such a hard one because like when I started, they told me they're like it's gonna be a slow start, we're gonna ramp you up and then it's gonna get really busy. And that's kind of how it was. So when I first started, I was only doing like half of the time at work, and then the other half I was just kind of like learning and stuff like that. So it was
Okay.
very like less work hours, more like learning hours. Um,
Gotcha.
yeah, and then like now it's like I'm like very busy like all the time just because like I'm finally like at a better spot or like better understanding where I'm taking on more projects or like bigger projects and I'm
Yeah.
collaborating with like more team members and like I'm leading projects and I'm leading demos and like I'm doing so much more. So I think now it's like a busier season than it was before.
Awesome. And here's the question more out of like the blue, but I connect. So as a woman, you mentioned your first generation, same here. Is there anything you would say, like going into this role that, was important for you to learn or like overcome? What would you say to like people wanting to get into it that may have a similar background to you?
Yeah, I think it's important. Oh my God. I feel like you just need to get out there. That's like my whole philosophy is just like getting out there and like not letting not letting yourself like limit like the opportunities you could have. Like let them say no to you, say no to you, but like you should just like apply for anything, like get into anything, and I don't know, like always just be like
Give it
flexible
your
to like,
shot.
yeah,
Yeah,
like really. And I think that's gotten me like very far.
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so what is something people really underestimate about the profession? I know you mentioned you have to be a constant learner. Is there anything you would add to that?
Um, I feel like some people might think that like um doing like coding and things like that like that's like hard and like it takes a lot of time, but I feel like because technology is always changing, it's you that has to like adapt very
Yeah.
quickly. And so I think instead of like thinking, oh, you have to be like really smart or like you have to understand a lot, I think the better quality to have is like learning how to like learn fast and adapt. So I feel like some people get discouraged, and I feel like if you could adapt and if you can learn, you could just go with the flow. I feel like you'll do great.
Yeah. Awesome. And what about, what's something people overestimate about the profession? So think like something that might get overhyped in the industry or, maybe assumptions people make about the job, but that end up actually being harder than it is. Curious.
Oh my God. That's so hard. Oh my God. Let's see. I think just documenting is a lot
Okay.
harder than like people would say.
Okay.
Uh, there's this like whole saying that like they'll never get rid of like the old engineer because he doesn't document well. Because like he's the only one that like knows like how
Right.
things are working.
Yes.
So I do think that like people might hear like, oh, documentation, like that's easy, but that actually takes a lot of like time and like a lot of I don't know, just like stress to like make sure everything's like documented at the end of like projects and making sure everything's like in because at the end of the project, like you just want to be finished with it. You're like done. You've already like put all these hours of like developing. The last thing you want is to like write like a whole big description of like
Right.
going on for your even like if it's for yourself, even like coming back to
Gotcha.
later on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And what do you think is the fastest way to get into this profession? I know you've been in it around 2 years. So, do you think you should try to get an internship in the area before, you know, going to apply for a full-time opportunity? Or, what do you recommend? Especially maybe if you're someone coming from like a non-traditional background, but you want to get your foot in the door.
Mhm. I definitely recommend internships, even if you're not like traditional background. I feel like that really provides perspective into like if that's something you even want to do.
Right.
I think that's very important before like you just continue on or like apply for these roles because sometimes you're walking in and you're not really sure what it all entails. And so for me, I had an internship right before I graduated. And it really opened this whole perspective because I was doing a lot of like back end and the
Mhm.
internship was like cybersecurity. And I was like, that's
Yeah.
not what I actually want to do. So I think it provides a lot of perspective for sure. An internship and like networking gets you so like far in life. So I think that's very important as well, which is something that like anybody can do also because you just have to like be open to talk to people and meet people and things like that. So I think those two would be my top.
Great. Awesome. And so, okay, you mentioned earlier that most people you work with do have that computer, engineering type
Mhm.
of degree.
Yeah.
Do you find that there's any other fields that people are coming from to get into this specific role, or do you think it's random? I know tech is just very constantly changing, so I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah. So for like I mentioned earlier, for like my specific team on like the UI UX side,
Yes.
we all do have degrees in like that section. But like for other people in like my bigger team, some come from like non-traditional backgrounds, where they like change from being a teacher into like tech, and now they do coding all day. And so I would say that's very untraditional and stuff. But I think if you can learn and if you could like like be really good. I think it doesn't matter if like your bachelor's or like if your degree or all of the other things aren't lining up for that job title. So
Okay.
I think it's like being prepared for when you do have that opportunity
Mhm.
to like show that you can excel in these skills.
Yeah. And so, right off of that, what do you think are those skills that people have to be good at? What do they have to, have come naturally to them to be good at the job?
Yeah. So I think problem solving is very like high up there, like being able to come up with like creative solutions, adaptability, learning fast, and just like being able to like absorb like information and just being like a team player. I feel like that really takes you very far.
Yeah. And I know you've been in this role for 2 years. I know you mentioned you feel, that you have grown a lot and now you're actually getting like a lot more projects to work on.
Uh,
How long do you feel it took you or that it would take someone to get really good at this job?
Oh my God. I definitely think it's you I'm not sure it's like on time. I think
Okay.
it's just depends on like the types of projects that you end up having that get you here. Because like early on, I had like this massive project that ended up being like very more complicated than we all
Right.
thought. Which prepared me for like where I am now, which I was able to like jump like a lot of stuff just because of like the experience I have with the project. So sometimes it's not about time, it's about like the actual experience you get doing the projects to like get you to the next level.
Like the hands-on experience
Yes.
is depends on what you get, and then from that depends on what you learn. Okay, makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay, so the UX UI just industry or like career path in general tends it's actually like relatively new. So I'm curious, what is the typical promotion path like in these types of roles? And from entry point to like the highest position you can hold, like how much time do you think an individual can spend at each of those levels?
Yeah. So I think that's hard because like the team I work for is like the business management operations team, which is
Okay.
not like, the engineering side. So I
Okay.
work with, like the business operations. So our like UI UX team is very like small. And so there's only like a few things that you can do as far as like career path. So I think for me, like the next level would be like kind of like how it goes, like 1, 2, 3, I think, and then you kind of like do something else. So
Okay.
you always have to be like figuring out what type, where do you want to go, if that's like, if you want to be like a product owner or like a project manager. And so like, it's just kind of like figuring out where you want to go with it. Because I
Gotcha.
think you could, like stay at like doing like kind of like the same job, but over the years you get like, you'll be like two, like engineer two, engineer three. But
Okay.
like after that, it's more like you really need
Kind
to
of
figure,
shifting.
yeah, really need to shift into other like roles.
Yes. Okay. That's still intertwined, right? Because I'm sure like you probably work with a project manager of some sort or a product management. Yeah. Okay. So I see that. It's kind of like, okay, I see what I like here, but I want to try something new
Yeah,
versus like growing within the same type of task, but maybe like growing in scope.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. And then this one is a more personal question, so
Yeah.
please feel free to answer in like as wide of a range as you would like to provide. But what would you say is like the average salary for someone in, UX UI roles like yours?
Yeah. So I think the salary ranges a lot depending
Okay.
on like the background, depending on like the oh my God, uh the experience and just kind of like the company that you work at. So I have seen this role go from a 60 all the way to 100K. So it just
Yeah.
really like it just really varies.
Okay. So it's just dependent on where you're at, basically. Awesome.
Yes, and it
Yeah.
just also depends on like the company and like the total comp package, which I feel like a lot of people want to know the salary, but then they don't ever mention total comp, which I
Gotcha.
feel like yeah, it's a whole mess,
Total
honestly.
comp, I'm assuming we mean like all the benefits added on, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. Yeah, so that was something that like I wasn't familiar with when like I would talk to other people and they would like be like, oh, I'm making this, and then they would talk about like the total comp and not the base. And so then you're just like, what? Like that's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. I got you. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. Definitely important to keep that in mind, not just look at the salary. Okay.
for sure.
So you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but I'm curious if there's any other role that you might want to mention. So we talked about the promotion path, and now like you mentioned some people might want to choose to go into like a product owner type of role or a project management type of role. If people want to move on from, the specific field you're in, do you find that there is a pattern to what they go into next, or do they just kind of springboard into anything?
I think they just go into like different, like it's very different.
Oh, really? Okay.
Um, yeah, it's very different.
Okay. Awesome. And is there any examples like that come to mind, like of like super opposing roles that they go into?
Mm, no, I don't think so. I think it's always just like moving like up in like leadership.
Okay,
Mhm.
gotcha. So, Arlette, could you share with me perhaps some like books, resources, podcasts? You shared some certifications earlier, but anything that you would, recommend to someone that is wanting to get into this profession?
Um, I'm not sure about like books.
Yeah,
But
makes
I
sense.
would I would definitely recommend like looking into like Figma, looking into like the Microsoft version of that. I know some people also do a lot of like dashboards, and that's using like Tableau, Power BI. And so
Mhm.
I feel like just like maybe like looking into those technologies could also get you very far. Yeah, and then I really like the Google certificates. So yeah, looking
Yeah.
into those as well.
Awesome. Do you, by any chance, find that there's like any popular certification or course out there that you would like not recommend people do? Just curious.
I don't think so. No, I
Okay.
haven't heard of like anything like
Yeah.
crazy.
No,
Yeah.
it varies like industry to industry, but sometimes there's like hard no's that some professionals share. So I was just curious to see what you thought. Um, what about, okay, we're actually reaching near the end of the interview. So I wanted to ask you, what is something that you would tell your younger self when you were just starting off your career right out of college?
But did you say right out of college?
Yes.
Um, hmm, that like everything works out. Yeah, everything works out at the end.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, and well, thank you so much for joining me today. Could you share with me where can people reach you or follow along with what you're doing at work?
Yeah, so people can reach me at LinkedIn.
Everything you shared is completely valuable and it's going to help so many young professionals who are looking into this field, especially wanting to go into tech, which is a pretty competitive field. So, thank
Yeah,
you.
for sure. Thank you so much for having me.
You just got one episode closer to learning about the world of jobs out there. To explore the rest of our career categories and find your best fit, go to jobdictionary.com to sign up for the beta users waitlist. Then subscribe here to find the next episodes coming out this week. And as always, drop us a comment, review, or message to let us know how we can better attune our episodes to your specific needs. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, Threads, Pinterest, and wherever else you're on socials to go get our short, snappy preview reels that expose you to new job options every day. Because here at Job Dictionary, we believe your big aha moment can be just one scroll away. Go check it out and get out there. Cheers!